But this evening, we're going to do Vizot HaBerakhah. And 33 and 34 are not terribly long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my slides up on the screen and I'm going to read the whole portion to you. Chapter 34 is really short, and chapter 33 is really not that long. So we're going to read it together, and then we will begin to discuss a little bit about this. Now, I will tell you up front that this is all very mysterious. It's also very hard to translate. If you looked at your reading this week, if you're a person who just likes to switch translations to see, I don't know why, I just do that all the time, because there's always, whatever translation I'm reading, something just feels weird, and I switch to another translation and it says something different. What you'll find in this Torah portion especially is if you switch back and forth between different translations, they can be very different. There are certain words in this Torah portion which are never used anywhere else. There are phrases and ideas that are never used anywhere else. They're very difficult to translate. Lots of different ideas about how they're supposed to be translated and what they mean. This is one of those sections like when Jacob blessed his sons, where this is like prophetic, vision into the future. It's very, very challenging to understand and to glean. Now, if you're steeped in rabbinic lore regarding, legends of the Jews and certain things in the Talmud, then you'll have some ideas, but none of that's all extra biblical, so there's no way to know whether it's accurate or not. It's just Jewish tradition, but it's nevertheless it's enlightening in some cases. So what I'll do is I will just begin to read for you in the New American Standard Version, and I'll bring in some other translations in a couple of minutes to be able to show you different things that you might not have seen. So we'll take a look at those. All right, so I'm switching to this, and then we'll go ahead and read this portion. It says, "Now this is the blessing with which Moshe, the man of God, blessed the sons of Israel before his death. He said, Yuvah came from Sinai and dawned on them from Seir. He shone forth from Mount Paran, and he came from the midst of 10,000 holy ones. At his right hand there was flashing lightning for them. Indeed, he loves the people. All your holy ones are in your hand, and they follow in your steps. Everyone receives of your words. Moses charged us with a law, a possession for the assembly of Jacob. And he was king in Yeshurun. When the heads of the people were gathered, the tribes of Israel together." And here's where the blessings begin, starting with Reuben. Verse 6. "May Reuben live and not die, nor his men be few. And this regarding Judah. So he said, Hear, O Yuvah, the voice of Judah, and bring him to his people. With his hands he contended for them, and may you be a help against his adversaries. Of Levi, he said, Let your Thummim and your Urim belong to your godly man, whom you proved at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and mother, I did not consider them. And he did not acknowledge his brothers, nor did he regard his own sons, for they observed your word and kept your covenant. They shall teach your ordinances to Jacob, and your law to Israel. They shall put incense before you and whole burnt offerings on your altar. O Yuvah, bless his substance and accept the work of his hands. Shatter the loins of those who rise up against him, and may those who hate him, so that they will not rise again. Of Benjamin, he said, May the beloved of Yuvah dwell in security by him, who shields him all the day, and he dwells between his shoulders. And of Yosef he said, Blessed of Yuvah be his land, with the choice things of heaven, with the dew, and from the deep lying beneath, and with the choice yield of the sun, and with the choice produce of the months, and with the best things of the ancient mountains, and with the choice things of the everlasting hills. and with the choice things of the earth and of its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush. Let it come to the head of Joseph, and to the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. As the firstborn of his ox, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he will push the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth. And those are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and those are the thousands of Manasseh. Of Zebulun he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going forth, and Issachar in your tents. They will call peoples to the mountain. There they will offer righteous sacrifices, for they will draw out the abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand. Of Gad he said, Blessed is the one who enlarges Gad. He lies down as a lion and tears the arm, also the crown of the head. Then he provided the first part for himself, for there the ruler's portion was reserved. And he came with the leaders of the people. He executed the justice of Jehovah and his ordinances with Israel. Of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp that leaps forth from Bashan. Of Naphtali he said, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of the blessing of Jehovah, take possession of the sea and of the south. Of Asher he said, More blessed than sons is Asher. May he be favored by his brothers, and may he dip his foot in oil. Your locks will be iron and bronze, and according to your days, so will your leisurely walk be. There is none like the God of Yeshurun, who rides the heavens to your help, and through the skies in his majesty. The eternal God is a dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he drove out the enemy from before you and said, Destroy. So Israel dwells in security, the fountain of Jacob secluded, in a land of grain and new wine. His heavens also drop down dew. Blessed are you, O Israel. Who is like you, a people saved by Jehovah? Who is the shield of your help and the sword of your majesty? So your enemies will cringe before you, and you will tread upon their high places. Deuteronomy 34. Now Moshe went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, and Jehovah showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, and all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, and the Negev, and the plain in the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Then Jehovah said to him, This is the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there. So Moshe the servant of Jehovah died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of Jehovah. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no man knows his burial place to this day. Although Moses was 120 years old when he died, his eye was not dim, nor was his vigor abated. So the sons of Israel wept for Moshe in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moshe came to an end. Now Yehoshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, for Moshe had laid his hands on him, and the sons of Israel listened to him and did as Jehovah had commanded Moshe. Since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face, for all the signs and wonders which Jehovah sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh, all his servants and all his land, and for all the mighty power and all the great terror which Moshe performed in the sight of all Israel. So there is the entire Torah portion, and I got a couple of notes. Now, what I used to do this more frequently, and I probably ought to start again to just ask you guys as we're reading through this, what is there anything that caught your eye or your ear that we were reading there that kind of perked you up? Now, we won't dig into it, just points that we might want to touch on as we go along. Did anything catch your attention? Online or in person, anyone is welcome to just shout it out if you like. Tracy.
I just noticed that Simeon wasn't mentioned. Do you have anything about that?
I do. I have a couple of ideas. I mean, I have some commentary about that. It's a bit of a mystery for sure, but yes, Tracy made a good point. Simeon is not mentioned. You know, there's frequently whenever the tribes are listed, someone is missing. It's not uncommon. Does anybody ever remember any other times when in the Bible when the tribes are listed and one's missing? In the book of the Revelation, does anyone know who's missing in the book of the Revelation? It is Dan. The tribe of Dan is missing in the book of Revelation. So yeah, it's not uncommon, and no one knows exactly why. There's obviously, I'm sure you can imagine, endless speculation about why that might be. Anything else catch your attention, Mike?
You got Dan as a lion's whelp, whereas in Genesis, Judah is.
That's true, yes. Dan, it says here, is a lion's whelp, whereas in Genesis it says that Judah is a lion's whelp. It's an interesting observation. Anything else? Tammy?
Were the tribes, were they like good tribes, or were they the ones that are missing? Are they good tribes, or are they?
That's
like
a very
corrupt tribes?
that's a very common question. I don't know if you heard that, but Tammy said, "Are they good tribes or are they bad tribes? The ones that are frequently missing." You know, that's a great observation. A good question. There are some negative connotations in regard to Simeon about why he might be missing here. There are also some negative connotations in regard to the tribe of Dan about why they might be missing in the book of Revelation. And we can definitely deal with that in just a moment as I've got some notes about the missing tribe. Any other observations? There's lots of.
What would be Issachar?
What was that?
What was the mention of Issachar?
Issachar, let me just see here. It says in verse 18, and I'll put this up on your screen for you. Of Zebulun, he said, "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going forth, and Issachar in your tents. They will call peoples to the mountain. There they will offer righteous sacrifices, for they will draw out the abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand." So that is the notes regarding Issachar. Did you have a question about that?
Thank you. No, it's just rather mysterious.
Yes, it's all rather mysterious. Yes, it is. Anything else? Yes, John.
Maybe about Moses was buried by Yahweh himself.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he was never found, which later on also becomes an important thing. I wonder why the relevance of that is. I always wonder that. What is the true relevance of this?
I don't know if you heard that online, but John was asking about, Moshe being buried by the hand of Yahweh, and why it's mysterious and why nobody knows where his resting place is. You also have an interesting parallel passage in the book of Jude, I believe it is, where it says that an angel and the adversary quarreled over the body of Moses. So there's some very, very interesting things going on there with Moses being, buried. I mean, the rabbinic lore regarding what happened here is quite fascinating. I mean, they say, Moshe received the kiss of God, and he just instantly went to sleep. God buried him. They say that his grave was prepared and dug on the sixth day of creation. And that, he went and met with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and gave testimony and that his body was not corrupted, that when it went into the grave, it was full of fruit or something like that, to where it would not decay and is totally preserved. That, I don't know, when I read that, it made me think of, how Moshe and Elijah showed up on the Mount of Transfiguration with Yeshua. But yeah, there's a lot of very mysterious lore about what in the heck happened to Moses. There was also a comment, and I'll just throw this out there for your consideration about the rabbis were quite confused about why the punishment for Moshe striking the rock was such that he was not able to enter the promised land. They thought that just seemed really unfair, that the punishment didn't seem to fit the crime. And I know that when we looked at that, where it happened in the book of Numbers, chapter 20, I think it is, or 23, I can't remember, we kind of wondered about the same thing. It's like, man, Moses did some dumb things throughout his life, but, striking the rock when he should have spoken to the rock doesn't seem that bad. But, I mean, he was denied entry into the promised land because of that. That just threw the rabbis into confusion because they were like, that just doesn't make any sense. It seems terribly unfair. But when we looked at it in light of, this prophetic shadow picture of the rock, Paul tells us that Messiah Yeshua is that rock, and that, that the rock was struck once and spoken to the second time to bring forth life. It's almost like Moses destroyed this wonderful prophetic shadow picture that God had in mind. You would think surely he wouldn't have let Moses screw that up, and yet it happened. And I have surmised, and certain others have too, of course, about maybe why Moshe was punished so harshly. Gracie?
Can it be because after the rock was struck, that would be when Christ was crucified and paid for our sins, and the life-giving water flowed through that rock for the people.
Right.
So it's kind of spiritual and kind of physical. But then in the New Testament, isn't it?
But ultimately, he was spoken for, that represented the life and the resurrection.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't crucify Christ twice.
Right.
But then in Hebrews 10, it talks about that when they re-crucify the Lord by not obeying and not, how do you say that, Chip?
No, I know what you're saying. You don't have to explain it, but I think everybody is familiar with that passage in Hebrews where it says, if you are refusing to obey, it's like striking the Messiah, being crucified a second time, and that's portrayed in a very negative light.
Follow him and then turn you away from him. Can you be restored when that would be re-crucifying him?
Right.
So to speak. And I wondered, Jerry had mentioned in our home, talking about it when we were reading those parts, that's what it looked like to him, and it makes sense.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting stuff. Any other comments about that kind of stuff? Marie?
Yes, I think it's showing something, it's prophetic for something in the future where Moses is representing the first believers. Well, first believers I usually refer to are the people, the early believers who believed in Yeshua when he came the first time. Either was waiting for the prophecies, like the patriarchs were, or us that had seen him come now when we're believing. I usually refer to them as the first believers. Moses is representing the first believers. And at the end of this age, there will be people who will be going into the promised land in their body, who will not have a glorified body. So Moses represents, hopefully all of us, who will be first believers, who will be taken away and will be glorified somewhere in the body. And then we'll have the regular people who will be going in with Joshua, the later believers, when Yeshua comes the second time and they see him as king. That's what I see from that. So even though it looks hard, God's Torah is basically is just showing us what will happen in the future. That's what I see. So the rabbis are on something, I think, when they say they saw the flowers and his body wasn't corrupted. It's just amazing how they see it, but they can't see everything.
Yes, it's frustrating.
Moses entered a better land
He actually
than the
did.
physical land that was down here that he didn't go into.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you guys for sharing. Okay, so I'm going to go through just a couple of comments that I have. As you can tell, I mean, this is a really hard section, and I'm so glad that you guys were able to, bring forth your comments and questions, and that that we have some of these things to talk about, because this is a really hard section to teach. I can't interpret a lot of this stuff. I can only show you some weird things that are a little unusual, and some things that are mythical, legendary, which may or may not be true. So we'll deal with it as best we can. But let's take a look. I'm going to start right from the beginning in verse 1, where it says, if you have your Hebrew Bible in front of you, you will see that the first words are vizot HaBerakhah, which is these are, and this is the blessing, and that is the name of the Torah portion. And of course, this is happening at the end of Moshe's 120 years. I have heard a couple of people say that it's kind of interesting, because when Moshe was throughout his life leading the tribes, especially the last 40 years through their wilderness wanderings, he was often like a father who was chiding them and guiding them and correcting them and punishing them. And occasionally, I can't actually remember a time where he gave them praise and said, "Good job, guys." I don't remember that actually happening. It's very, very uncommon. But they suggested that this section here is like Moshe speaking to them like a grandfather. He's no longer responsible for them. He's reached the end of his time teaching them. It's like, I've taught you everything I can teach you, and now I'm going to pronounce some blessings for you. You know how it is, if those of you who are grandparents, when the grandchildren come around, it's like you get to enjoy them, and you don't really have to discipline them too much. They're not your kids. If you don't like what they're doing, you just send them home to mom and dad and tell them go about your business. But that was an idea. Also, right at the beginning here, it says that Moshe is a man of God, and that phrase, Ish ha-Elohim, the man of God, is used 78 times throughout the Bible. It is only used about Moshe in the Torah, and it is only used about one figure in the New Testament. Can you guess who that might be? It's a little unusual. I was a little surprised by this. Someone in the New Testament is called a man of God, and it is not Yeshua. It is actually Timothy. Isn't that strange? I don't know what to make of that. Certainly interesting. But Moses is the only one in the Torah who is referred to as a man of God, and Timothy is the only one in the New Testament referred to as a man of God. And this phrase is almost exclusively referred to, used in reference to prophets. There's one time in the book of Judges where it's used to refer to an angel who came down to meet someone, and I think maybe they thought he was a prophet. I don't know. But it's an unusual phrase to see the man of God in the Torah. Only once, and only used of Moshe right here. Just, make a note of it. What does it mean exactly? Uncertain. It certainly seems to suggest, because of what we've read here, about Moshe being a great prophet. And I mean, you can see at the end of the section, it says, no prophet arose like Israel in that since then, except for Yeshua. But in my estimation, and we have talked about the comparison and contrast between Moshe and Yeshua being the true prophets who heard from God directly, face to face, the true intermediary between God and man, that those two men are the only two in the Bible who meet that requirement. And looking at any time, I'm kind of got my attention split three ways. So if you're online, just unmute yourself and shout out at me if you want to say something, and you guys too. Anytime, just interrupt me. Verse 2, there's great trouble with this translation here. He came with myriads of holiness. Came with the myriad. My translation there said he came from the midst of 10,000 holy ones. It's just a very unusual phraseology that is translated, I'm sure, if you switch around between a couple of different translations, it's not exactly sure what is being said there. And then at the end of that section where it says, and from his right hand went forth a law of fire, is the Darby translation. That one, the NASB, and I'll put that up on the screen for you, the NASB at the end of verse 2 says that at his right hand there was flashing lightning for them. It's very different. That is ish dot. And it's interesting because this is not two separate words in the Hebrew translation. It's just crammed together, ish dot, which if you look in your Hebrew interlinear and you check out the Strong's word, it says ish dot, a fiery law, a fire of a law. Fire was a law. It says meaning uncertain. Now, what's interesting is that ish means fire. For those of you who have done a little bit of study in the Hebrew, know that the ish is fire. And da'at is a fairly uncommon word. It's not used terribly frequently in the Torah. In fact, most modern scholars and even old ones, going back to the Middle Ages, don't actually think that this is a dot is not actually a Hebrew word. If you notice, it says, if you're looking at your Strong's, it says the origin from H784 and H1881. If you look at 1881, it says dot. That's just dalet tav. It says decree, law, edict, regulation, usage. It says origin of uncertain derivation, perhaps foreign. And look at where it is used. It is only used here in Deuteronomy 33, and it is also used in Esther and in Ezra. That's it. Esther and Ezra. Now, what do you know? What is the similarity? What's the connection between Esther and Ezra? Yes, Esther and Ezra were approximately around at the same time. And where were they both from? Where did they both come from? They were both part of the Persian Empire. This is actually, dot is a Persian word that means law. And so, this just puzzled me and it fascinated me, and I dug deeper into it. And what I actually discovered is that I apologize because I missed my note in this part of it, and I meant to bring this out, and I totally spaced writing it down. So I would encourage you to take a look at this. But it appears that this translation that you have on your screen, where it says there was a flashing lightning for them, that's actually a better translation, because there's a Hebrew word dot, which has to do with lights or flashing of some kind. And so they believe that, yes, that word dot is used, and you know that certain portions of the book of Daniel are in Aramean, and Ezra and Esther. There's a lot of Aramean words in there. And so they think that this is a mistranslation to say a fiery law. That's not. I believe that that's possibly true. It's not supposed to say a fiery law. It's supposed to say like lightning at his right hand when he was revealed. John?
I think also interesting if you read the sentence before what you already said, the 1,000 holy ones, if they're angelic beings, maybe that also is in relation to that. It's like spiritual life.
Well, John is pointing out that it says in the verse before that he came from the midst of 10,000 holy ones. And when you look at some of those passages from like Ezekiel, for example, and it talks about some of these holy beings, these holy angels, they are like flames of fire. So it's certainly possible that what's being referenced here is God, a vision of God. I don't know that this is what they actually saw. It could be. There's not a real clear description about what they saw when he came down on Mount Sinai. But it could be that they saw something like him coming from the midst of flaming angels and, seemed like he had lightning in his hand or something. I don't know. It's certainly a vision of grandeur for certain. But is it a fiery law? I don't believe so. Tracy?
Just made me think of Revelation chapter 1, verse 16 says, and he had in his right hand 7 stars. And then 20 says, the mystery of the 7 stars which you saw in my right hand. And it says that the 7 stars are the 7 messengers of the 7 churches. So,
yeah.
I was wondering if there's a connection there.
That it actually sounds like there might be. I think that's actually a good observation. I hadn't thought of that, but I think that your connection with in his right hand 7 stars or the messengers of the 7 assemblies. I think that's a very good observation. Absolutely. So if you're taking notes, write that one down, because I can just tell you that I can bring out and show you a couple of weird things in this text, the things that are certainly interesting and somewhat confusing too. So make notes to yourself and dig a little bit deeper. You're going to have to, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on here.
I have a question.
Please.
One other thing too, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And maybe Mike or Keith or somebody that knows more about timelines will do better with this than I will, but just about Moses being 120 years old. Are you going to touch on that?
What you mean, like which portion of his life was spent doing what?
No, just that, it's interesting that it says he was a son of 120 years when he died, and Genesis 6:3 is where it says, Yahweh says, my spirit shall not always contend with men, for the days of man shall be 120 years. And I was just, as I was reading it this time, was just thinking about and what Marie was saying about this like physical body and spiritual body. Mike had just done a little study about 120 years as this age of man being like 50 times 50, which would be 6,000 years.
Right.
It's 120 times 50,
right.
Making it jubilees.
Right.
I know I'm not being very clear.
No, and I think I totally understand where you're coming from, and I think most of us have heard about the 120, which is 50, or 120 jubilees, which is 6,000 years. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Carry on. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So what I was thinking about was that how in Luke 16, I think 31 is when Messiah says they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. It's kind of like you will have Moses or my word, my Torah, for 120 years, and then that's going to be the end of it. It's kind of like this period of I could just be making this up, but it's just something that's kind of struck me that maybe there was something to this length of time that he says he's not always going to strive with man, and the exact same amount of years that Moses is living as something prophetic and spiritual that maybe we need to learn from.
No, I think that's a good insight. Does Mike or Keith want to comment? I'm coming back to you, Tracy. You like that? Make up some more.
Well, that's a good connection, and it sort of matches what Marie was saying, because there'll be those that will get into the land differently than the ones after that. Like, there's going to be people that won't get the glorified body that will come in after, and that'll be the end of that 120 years.
That's a fascinating, that's a fascinating observation.
I think they are coming together.
That's a fascinating connection. I like that very much. I'll open up the floor to discuss this. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Hold on to that. Tammy, go ahead.
I just wanted to say back to the light question.
The lights, the light from the right hand or whatever.
Right. Paul also saw a flash of light as well when he was on the road.
Oh, yes.
So, and I just read that today. That's why.
Yeah, that's Tammy mentioned, if you didn't hear it, that Paul, was struck blind by a flash of light, on the road to Damascus. So that's an interesting connection to make as well, for sure. Yeah. In regards to the 120 years, I mean, and I like, what Tracy was saying about, Moshe being, the law that Moshe gave us from Yuvah being, ruling the earth for 120 years, 120 Jubilees, 6,000 years. So if that is so, and I have no reason to think that it is not so, when that 6,000 years terminates, and let's say that for the sake of discussion that the kingdom is established in that 7,000th year, does that mean that the Torah is no longer valid during the millennium? Does it mean that it is now fully written on our hearts? Does it mean that certain people who have entered into the land in a glorified body have a strong connection to that and live it out, while others who entered the land in a physical body do not? I mean, that's obviously ripe for speculation, but I just wanted to throw that out there. What are your thoughts about that? Who's going, Tracy or Marie?
I'm gonna go, but Tracy can go ahead.
Marie can go. It's fine.
All right, I'm gonna call on somebody. Tracy, you go first. Go.
I was just going to make the connection, too, is that as we just read, the very last word of the Torah is the word Israel. The very first word of the Torah is in, and we know that his word is supposed to be in Israel, in our hearts. And we've already talked in detail, I think, before about how the first letter and the last letter spell heart. First letter of the Torah, the last letter spell heart. So it's like just confirmation after confirmation that this word is what's supposed to be in the heart of his people, who he calls Israel.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Marie?
Yeah, so I was saying I agree with Tracy, and Yeshua will be here at the end when he's establishing the kingdom, so we won't really, it's not going to go away, but it will not, he'll be ruling with righteousness, and the people who will be in glorified, incorruptible bodies, as Tracy says, it will be written in their hearts, and the people who will be there in their physical, natural bodies will have Yeshua himself, so he doesn't need Moses per se, again, to for us to observe, but we'll be observing the same thing that Moses kind of gave us, but we don't need Moses again. That's what basically I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeshua be here.
Yeah. No,
So
understood.
Sort of like a surrogate. Moses is kind of a surrogate until Yeshua arrives. Sort of like how we have the sun now giving us light, but when Yeshua arrives, we won't need the sun anymore. Sort of.
I think that is a brilliant observation, and I would remind everyone that I think is exactly, what Paul was talking about. If indeed Paul wrote the book of Hebrews, which I don't know that he did, who knows? But I think that's one of the things that Paul, or whoever the author of the book of Hebrews, is talking about when he's comparing, this new covenant with the old covenant. When he's comparing the priesthood of Levi with the priesthood of the Messiah Yeshua through the order of Melchizedek. It's interesting too that Moses also could be said to function after the order of Melchizedek, because Moshe really was kind of a king and a priest. He did certainly fulfill some of the roles of a priest, although he was not of the family of Aaron. I mean, he's Aaron's brother, but you can't be a member of the priesthood unless you are either Aaron or his sons. Doesn't say anything about the brother of Aaron, but Moses certainly did fulfill the role of a priest on many occasions. He could go into certain parts of the tabernacle that others couldn't go to. He offered sacrifices. He communicated with Yuvah face to face. So he certainly is he also acted as a king in many situations. I think, in fact, in part of this segment, I think that there are probably 2 sections where it is talking about Moses as a king. And there's some confusion about translating this again, because there's some people who say, no, that can't be Moses. He wasn't a king. It must be talking about God being the king. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because God is their king. But isn't it also true that Moses functioned as a king for them in many instances? He led them into battle. He enforced the Torah. That's what a king does. The executive branch of government enforces the law, issues the law, and enforces the law. They don't really have a legislative branch of government. They aren't making up rules. They got that from God. God is the legislative branch of government. So, it's just and it's an interesting idea that Moshe also is kind of after the order of Melchizedek as a king and a priest, just like Yeshua is. And I think that the writer of the book of Hebrews is touching on that a little bit. Sorry, didn't mean to get totally off track and distracted, just something to think about. Comments, questions, concerns about that? I'm going to move forward just a little bit. Okay. I'm looking at verse 4. I'm going to put verse 4 up on the screen here for a second. It says, Moses charged us with a law, a possession for the assembly of Jacob. If you look at those words a little bit more carefully and you take a look at it, I think that you're really seeing a phrase in there that is basically telling us that the Torah is our inheritance. Are you guys seeing that when you're looking into the Hebrew a little bit and you're looking into the language there? It really is giving me the impression when I read it that the Torah is an inheritance for the family of Jacob. And for those of us who are grafted in to the family of Jacob. And it really made me think of, what is an inheritance? Well, an inheritance, if you get an inheritance from a family member, it's certainly something of great value, and it's also something that you pass on to your children. It's just an amazing piece of wisdom that was embedded in that text. That's like that the Torah is an inheritance for the family of Jacob. It's something valuable that you receive, and it's something valuable that you pass down. And that's so many times enforced throughout the Torah, where it's like, you shall teach it to your children. It's like, this is some serious business. And I think to the degree that we teach it to our children, that we pass it on, even if it's our spiritual children and not our physical children, these instructions for what righteousness is and how you can receive blessings on this planet, how you can live at peace with man and God by observing, by being obedient, by trusting in Him. I just thought it was an interesting insight into that little passage in verse 4, that says an inheritance. Anybody on that, Mikey?
Yeah, I was just thinking, the Torah is how we know who God is. In order to draw close to Him, to know what He likes, what He doesn't like, His character, all of that is in the Torah. That's why it's so important. And as you said, it's an inheritance that gets passed down. And your question earlier was, is it something that is still needed if it's written on the hearts and minds of the people? But I think I would remind us as well that the New Covenant says that as those laws are written on the hearts and minds of the people, that no man will need to teach his brother anymore, because everyone shall know the Lord, right? So if they know Him, they know the Torah.
Yeah.
Right? And so as we even move into this, new picture of whatever that millennial reign looks like, if that's a time of teaching, people are still realizing that new covenant. It hasn't been fully solidified until no one needs to teach anybody anymore, because that Torah is known by everyone.
That's a great observation, Mike. I don't know if you guys could hear him very well. He's always not only does he talk quietly, he has a very quiet microphone. One day, Mikey, you're going to fix that, buddy. Sorry. So I'm going to reiterate briefly before Tracy. I got you, Trey. You're up next. But I want to just reiterate what Mike said. It's like, this Torah is an inheritance, and that's how we know who God is and what He wants, and that's critical to understand. And he was also talking about how when the new covenant is prophesied in Jeremiah 31, that it really does talk about how the Torah will be placed upon the heart and upon the mind, but it will also be a time when nobody has to say, hey, you should come to know God, because everybody's going to know God. And it is for that reason that we recognize that the new covenant is not totally filled yet. It's not complete. I mean, you can see clearly when the Jews talk about the new covenant, that's one of the things that really trips them up. And I'm thinking that it tripped up a whole bunch of first century believers is because Yeshua is saying, it's here. And they're like, what are you talking about? All of our preconceived ideas about what this new covenant refreshing, this time of rejoicing, this, God being with us and the Messiah ruling, you're saying that's here now? Well, the Romans are still in charge. There's still hatred. There's still unkindness. So, the Torah is not going forth from Jerusalem. We still have those problems today. And so, I don't think we recognize that the new covenant as prophesied is not fully realized just yet. Certain key, really powerful components have certainly been realized, but the whole thing has not. And I think we see in the millennial reign, and we look at those prophecies of the millennial kingdom, and we see, okay, that's where it's coming into complete fruition. But it's not right now. It's a spiritual kingdom, if you want to call it that. Tracy, I apologize. Go ahead.
In the previous chapter, chapter 32, verse 9, it says, "For Yahuwah's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance." Mm-hmm. And then he's telling us our inheritance, which I think is a different Hebrew word, but it's probably similar meaning, is that our inheritance is his word. Mm-hmm. Like the promise that we've inherited, and if that word is in us, this Torah is in us, he recognizes us. It's like, oh, that one's mine. That one's mine.
Yep. Yep.
Like
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Good observations, you guys. Comments, questions, concerns, anyone? I'm sure there are tons of them. There's a lot of mysterious stuff going on there. Now, I'm going to get to verse 6 here. I'm going to put that up on the screen for a second. It says, "May Reuben live and not die, nor his men be few." That's also kind of hard to translate. Notice that very little is said here in regard to Reuben. That is not a wonderful blessing that is pronounced. May Reuben live and not die. May his men be few. It actually seems to say in the Torah, may his men be few, which is even weirder. So you can take a look at that. But it is suggested that Reuben had a rather, we call it a left-handed compliment from his father Jacob when he said, when he was giving the blessings to his sons, Reuben did not get a real good blessing there, because he basically said, you went up to my couch. Reuben, it is understood, I don't know if it's understood clearly in Christian circles, but certainly in rabbinic circles, you can see Reuben basically having sex with one of his father's concubines. I think it was Bilhah. Basically, was an attempt to overthrow his father. It's the same thing that happened in 2 Samuel chapter 14 or 15, where Avshalom drives off his father David, and David has to flee over the Mount of Olives, try to escape from his son who was in rebellion, and he had sex with his father's concubines publicly. Doesn't mean that they had sex in public. It just means everyone knew what was going on. That is an attempt to overthrow your own father, and it is suggested in the rabbinic writings that that's what Reuben did when he slept with Bilhah, that he was trying to usurp his father. He seems to have repented or something like that, because he wasn't like kicked out of the family, but he certainly, his prominence was severely curtailed, so to speak. Even here, he's still taking a beating, so to speak. And in relation to that, I was going to talk about Simeon, not being mentioned at all. What's interesting is that in the rabbinic sources, it is supposed that the reason that Simeon is not mentioned is because it was mainly the Simeonites who were responsible for the incident at Baal Peor, where the Midianite women, coaxed the men of Israel to party and drink and have sexual relations with their prostitute women. Well, we know that one guy who was like a prince of the tribe of Simeon is the guy who got speared by Pinchas. So they suggest that Simeon had a big role to play in leading the tribes to that doom with Baal Peor, and that is part of the reason that he was not mentioned here. There's something else that's kind of interesting that I saw here. Yes, ma'am.
What you just said about Simeon also applies to Dan, because they also led the people.
That is true. Angela is bringing up the idea that Dan, when he is not mentioned in the book of the Revelation, many people have suggested that the reason that Dan was not mentioned is because it is known from the book of Judges and the Chronicles that Dan was one of the first tribes to fall into idolatry and to lead the other tribes into idolatry. And they have supposed that might be why the tribe of Dan was not listed in the book of Revelation. That's an idea, but it is certainly known to be true that they got involved in idolatry rather early in the history of Israel. But what's interesting here, it is suggested that, do you remember the two sons when the incident at Shechem happened where Dinah got raped and they went to Shechem's son? I don't remember the guy's name. Huh? The king's son. Yeah, I don't remember his name, but they went and slaughtered all the residents of Shechem. Who were those two sons? Does anyone remember? It was Simeon and Levi. Now, the rabbis suggest that Levi repented and, came to grips with his sin and repented and made amends and got better. But that Simeon did not. Don't know whether that's true or not, but that's the idea. One of these other things is that when Jacob referred to Simeon in his quote-unquote blessing, he said that the tribe of Simeon would be dispersed in Israel. It is understood that the tribe of Simeon never actually inherited any land in the nation. They got subsumed into the other tribes, and mostly the tribe of Judah, that they kind of just got absorbed. And that is according to the prophecies of his father Jacob, and the fact that he's not mentioned here. It seems to suggest that. What's also interesting, I don't remember where I heard this, but it was kind of fascinating, was that there were 12 tribes led by Moses, and one of them, quote unquote, because Simeon did not exactly make it to the promised land. Now, it's not to say that Simeon didn't make it to the promised land, but when they got their inheritance, Simeon isn't mentioned. It's almost like there's some kind of falling away, and he didn't make it somehow. Does that sound familiar to you, that there were 12 tribes and one of them didn't make it? There was a leader with 12 of something and one of them didn't make it? What does that remind you of? That reminds you of Judas. That is correct. Does anyone know what tribe Judas was from? Now, you would assume that because his name is not Judas, by the way. His name is Yehuda. That's, that's been Americanized or whatever, but his name is actually Yehuda. So most people have just assumed, well, he must be from the tribe of Judah if his name is Yehuda. But if you remember in the book of Luke, does it say who his father is? Shimon. It says that his father's name is Shimon. And what is Iscariot? Iscariot is not his last name. Do you guys remember what Iscariot means? Tracy does. I know she does. Tell it, girl.
It means men of cities or man of cities.
That's right. Ish, man, Kiryot, cities. Man of cities, man of a city, something like that. So it is Yehuda, the son of Simeon, a man of the cities. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's certainly interesting to compare and contrast how there are 12 tribes and Simeon doesn't seem to have made it. And there were 12 disciples and Judas, the son of Simeon, a man of the cities, didn't make it. It's just an interesting comparison. Keith?
Hey, Alan, maybe that name came from them being dispersed amongst all the cities of Israel and they didn't have their own land.
That is an interesting observation. That is absolutely true. It is suggested in a lot of the rabbinic literature that the Simeonites just became city dwellers in and amongst the tribes of Judah. So that Yehuda, son of Simon, Ishkariot, that certainly seems to fit within that context, doesn't it?
That boy Levi was also destroyed.
That is also true of Levi, that he did not receive an inheritance, but that's for a very different reason.
No, but those two were the ones who did.
But yes, it's also interesting that those two are the ones who went and slaughtered the Shechemites and got in trouble.
Described in one of those prophecies as being vicious.
Bloodthirsty. Yeah, that's Jacob called them that.
If you look at Levi, their bloodthirstiness is now used to, they're up there sacrifice. They're covered in blood all day long.
Yeah.
Their job of sacrifice.
I don't know if you could hear Angela, but she was talking about how the Simeonites and the Levites were both the two men who attacked, Shechem and Hamor, I think, and slaughtered all the Shechemites. They are men of blood. Jacob did say, don't let me enter into their council. They're men of blood. And that, Simeon was perhaps still a man of blood, but that Levi did repent and became a man of blood, but in a different way. He's now a butcher. He's working at the tabernacle, slaughtering animals all day long. He's covered in blood too. He's used his talent for slaughtering things in a different way. You got to use your gifts. Keith?
Hey, do you know of any reference that actually someone put the time in to try to figure out where all the disciples originated, what tribes they were from?
Yeah, wait a minute. All right, wait a minute, Keith. You're jumping ahead of me here, but I know where you're going with that, and I think it's fascinating. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. That's an awesome observation, and I think it was because I did not hear of that, but I'll come to that in just a second. Certainly interesting. Sorry. So Reuben, not much of a blessing, usurped his father's bed, whatnot. In regards to the tribe of Judah from verse 7, I'll just put that up on the screen. No, that's me. You don't want me. You want tribe. Sorry. Regarding Judah, if you look at what he says in regards to Judah, it really does seem to be mainly related to kingship and leadership, because it has a lot to do with going out and coming in. And if you were not aware of this, that going out and coming in is really all about battle. That's about leading in troops and returning back home. So when you see the phrase going in and coming out, it has to do with battle. And a lot of these blessings that are pronounced in verses, I think, in verse 7, yeah, it's just verse 7. It's talking about the, excuse me. No, I apologize. The tribe of Judah, is that not in verse 7? Yeah, he did. Yeah, it's in verse 7. Okay. So hear, O Yehovah, the voice of Judah, and bring him to his people. With his hands he contended for them, and may you be his help against his adversaries. So it's almost exclusively in regards to battle and defense and positions of strength and fighting for the nation. And we do understand from the histories that the tribe of Judah were leaders in battle. The kings came from there. And I think you have to remember that, why was it that the nation of Israel wanted a king and clamored for a king and ended up getting Saul, the son of Kish? I think it's because they wanted someone to lead them into battle. They wanted a physical presence to lead them into battle. And they were not recognizing that God himself had led them into battle on so many occasions and defeated so many enemies for them. I think they lost sight of that physical ability to see and needed something physical to see. But Judah immediately after would take over the kingship line, and a lot of their tasks had to do with leading the nation into battle, gathering soldiers, collecting taxes for battle and soldier pay and weapons, and this is one of the primary functions. Now you don't see in fact it's kind of interesting when you look at the history of the kings of Israel who came from the tribes of Judah. Obviously after the split, when they're talking about the southern kingdom, very, very few of those kings of Judah were godly men. Very few of them. So that idea of a king and a priest, someone who is really spiritually founded and leading the nation, not only militarily, but spiritually, is very rare. Yes, you had it with David, but not always. He was a man of blood, if you'll remember. With Solomon, I would say yes, more definitively. With certain other kings, Hezekiah, there are a few others that they did try to do away with the high places and the idols and tried to follow God, but none of them really did that well. And I think that that's what you see from the tribe of Judah is military strength and leading the nation in battle, but not always being a good spiritual leader. And that's where I think Yeshua comes in and takes over, that role in the role of David and Solomon, where they are kings of righteousness, righteous kings, which is unusual for the kings of Israel through the tribe of Judah. And then of Levi, if you read, here's something that I want to point out to you, and I'm going to take that off of the screen because I want to read this to you. If you look at chapter 33, verse 8, where it's talking about the tribe of Levi, something very interesting. I read this, as I said, in several different translations, and something really stuck out to me when I read this in the Septuagint. I don't know how many of you read the Septuagint, but it's always interesting to me, and I do read the Septuagint, quite a bit because, I look at it like this. Yes, translating the Bible is a hard task. It's not an easy task, and that's why you get so many different translation errors and so many different interpretations of what a passage means. But when you look at the Septuagint, that was translated by 70, I think it was 70 or 80 Hebrew scholars about 200 years before Yeshua was born, and is published into Greek. And so it was interesting to see what 80 scholars 200 years before Yeshua was born, how they interpreted this. And when you look at the Septuagint of what it says about Levi, listen to this and tell me what your impression is. It says, "And to Levi he said, give to Levi his manifestations and his truth to the holy man, whom they tempted in the temptation. They reviled him at the water of strife, who says to his father and mother, I have not seen you. And he knew not his brethren, and he refused to know his sons. He kept your oracles and observed your covenant. They shall declare your ordinances to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. They shall place incense in the time of your wrath continually upon your altar. Bless, Lord, his strength and accept the work of his hands. Break the loins of his enemies that have risen up against him, and let them not that hate him rise up." Does anything strike you as a little unusual there when you read that in the Septuagint? It's very different than all the other translations. I will tell. Go ahead.
I just thought it sounded Messianic in some places.
Oh, goodness, yes.
It's the Messiah. I'm actually going to say that about some of these other blessings. Like, it seems like it's speaking maybe of him somehow.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me when I read that it was very strongly speaking of Messiah. It certainly didn't seem to be speaking of Levi or the tribes of Levi. I mean, as far as we know here, what's interesting is it's talking about when they tempted him in the temptation and they reviled him at the water of strife. Well, when you look at that in the Hebrew and you look at that in your other translations, it says Meribah and Massah. Now, Massah is that first time when the children of Israel grumbled just after having left Egypt, when Moses struck the rock. There's nothing mentioned at all in that Torah portion about the sons of Levi doing anything in that story. They didn't seem to be involved in that at all. And then Meribah is where they grumbled again, and Moses struck the rock again. Again, the tribes of Levi are not mentioned at all in that Torah portion. So why is Moshe in this prophetic utterance about the tribe of Levi talking about them in relation to Massah and Meribah? Doesn't seem to be any connection. But when these 80 rabbinic sources translated this into Greek 200 years before Yeshua, they're talking about, in his truth to the holy man whom they tempted at the temptation, and they reviled him at the water of strife. That really seems to be talking about Yeshua. That really does strike me as being having messianic overtones for certain. Anybody else picking up anything else in that?
I'm just picking up something messianic in the next one with Benjamin.
Oh, yes. Are you talking about in the Septuagint? Or just in general?
In general.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And, we can go to that one next. That's basically... I would just say that really sounds like Yeshua to me. Sounds like the zeal of Pinchas, which Yeshua certainly exhibited the zeal of Pinchas. It sounds like Yeshua saying, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. It's because this seems to be talking about at the incident with the golden calf, when Moses said to whoever is with me, and the sons of Levi came to him, and he said, strap on your sword and wade to and fro throughout the nation and kill whoever has joined himself to this golden calf. Now, it is supposed that they were killing their own brothers and sisters, because it says they didn't have, right here it says they didn't have any, he refused to know his sons, knew not his brethren. That's what they interpret it as. But they have also said that the sons of Levi were not involved in the incident with the golden calf, so that wouldn't possibly be true. If no Levites took part in the sin of the golden calf, then they wouldn't have been slaughtering their own family members, because they weren't involved. So that can't be... Yes, okay, so you could say... But this specifically references sons and brethren. Brethren could be, but sons maybe not. So it is certainly possible that it's just in relation to, killing other members of other tribes. But I think it's messianic. I certainly feel that way. There's some interesting things in there. And then Tracy has brought up verse 12, where it talks about Benjamin. Reading from the Septuagint, it says, and to Benjamin he said, the beloved of the Lord shall dwell in confidence, and God overshadows him always, and he rested between his shoulders. Now, Tracy, if you'd like to, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing there.
Hey, it's a little weird.
Let's hear. I like weird. Let's hear it.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering if, maybe if we studied this thinking about Messiah, if we'd see more of the picture. Because even the fact that Simeon's missing is curious to me, because Simeon, that name comes from the word Shema. Simeon means hearing. So it's like literally a famine for hearing. But hearing is not here. So there could be something like spiritual in that.
Yeah.
But Benjamin means And he's calling him the beloved, and that's like another name for David too. I don't know if that's the Hebrew word here, but Messiah is called the beloved son. And it says, the beloved of Yahovah, he shall dwell securely beside him, and that's like the right hand, covering him all day long. And then this part I thought was kind of weird, but it's interesting. Yea, he shall dwell between his shoulders. And so the constellation of Taurus, the ox, the bull, it's, Yahovah is like the bull, the ox, and he's got 7 stars in his shoulder, in between his shoulders, which is Pleiades. So this is making me think of that right hand and the stars in the hand, and I'm just wondering if there's something crazy, there.
Yes, absolutely. I think getting a good handle on the Hebrew Mazarot and those ideas. There's some, I don't know, years ago there were some people out there doing really good teaching about the Hebrew Mazarot, and Keith probably has talked about this before with other people. And I think that's not a bad idea at all, Tracy, to start to connect those things a little bit. Marie, did you want to chime in on that?
Yes, just interesting that I've been seeing that. I really do think that this whole chapter of Deuteronomy 33 is very spiritual. A lot of it is pointing to Messiah. And the Benjamin that I find is really interesting. If we go into like Samuel and Kings, we'll see where Benjamin is always with Judah. It's just interesting that the Benjaminites are always with them in battle or wherever they are. They tend to be with them. I don't know why, but it's really interesting that Benjamin is the tribe that kind of is always, and I don't know if it's because, remember, Judah kind of took the place of Benjamin when Joseph back in Egypt, when I think Joseph said, I'll keep Benjamin, and you go back and go to your father, and Judah's like, no, I can't do that to my father again. I'll take his place. And I don't know why, but there's always this connection with the Benjamins, and when the tribe of Judah is out there doing something, Benjamin is always right beside them. So it's really interesting.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very fascinating. And I would say, what's so interesting about Benjamin, there are several things that are very interesting about Benjamin, and certainly one of them is, and we talked about this when we looked at Benjamin in relation to when he was born. We noted that he was the only one of the sons who was born in the land of Israel. He was beloved of his father. There are many Messianic rabbis who actually like to say that the tribe of Benjamin is representative of Messianic believers from the tribes of, like Jews who believe in the Messiah are somehow represented by Benjamin. I don't know exactly how that works out. It's certainly an interesting concept. But, Benjamin is a very unusual character in the Bible. I mean, one of the things is that according to all of the sages, Benjamin was very warlike. And I think you can see that when you look at the history in, for example, the book of Judges, where that Levite took his concubine to the land of Benjamin, and there was an incident there that was horrific, and all of the tribes gathered together to do battle against the tribes of Benjamin, or the tribe of Benjamin. And what's fascinating is that they went to the prophet and said, should we go and defeat our brother Benjamin because of his wickedness? And God said, yes, go. And they went and fought. And the tribe of Benjamin kicked the tar out of all of the 11 of the other tribes. And they were puzzled and they were shaken, and they went back to God and said, should we go and fight against Benjamin? And God said, yes, go. And they went and did battle with them again, and they got the tar kicked out of them again by just that one tribe of Benjamin. And then they did it again, and they said, are you sure about this? Should we go and fight the tribe of Benjamin? And God said, yes, go. Now this time, they slaughtered the Benjamites to such a degree that there were very few of them left. And it was a tragedy that they almost completely wiped out the tribe of Benjamin altogether. It was a fascinating section of the history of Israel, and it's very, very interesting, but very unusual. I'm done. Who wants to? What do you got?
It's when Isaiah 9:6. Now there's many different versions have it as shoulder or shoulders. But the New King James Version says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder." Or other versions say shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So talk the shoulders. Resting on the shoulders is it's very messianic, showing his majestic power.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some mysterious things going on there with Joseph. He's a mysterious character. I don't know what to make of him exactly, but I know that it's also reflected in the first king of Israel, Saul, and the 13th apostle, Saul. They're both from the tribe of Benjamin. Very interesting tribe. Very interesting tribe. I'm going to spend just a moment on the tribe of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh in verses 13 through 17. This is the largest portion of the prophecy regarding the tribes. Is this section regarding, and I'll put that up on the screen for you there, verses 13 through 17. What's interesting is that in this section, it all seems to be related to temporal, physical blessings. That is often seen in regards to the tribes of Joseph. Just beauty and tremendous material blessings. What's very interesting about this section to me is that it's talking about in verse 17, as the firstborn of his ox, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox, and with them he will push the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth. And those are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and those are the thousands of Manasseh. So there's also some very mysterious things happening with these two tribes, and I think that this is, I'm certain that this is where a lot of the British Israelitism comes from in regard to Ephraim and Manasseh, because there's a lot of speculation that the British Empire was somehow descended from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, and that it is possible that, I don't know if, I guess I would say it's possible, but there's a lot of speculation that the British Empire, talking about New Zealand and Australia and America and Canada and these other places in the Western Hemisphere, are descended from Ephraim and Manasseh, and that these are the nations, and that somehow this, pushing the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth, that's a strange thing, and I don't think many people know what to do with that. But some people who are like prophecy buffs like to say, because of this British Israelitism thing, that this is a picture and a reference to the Western nations pushing peoples around, ruling the earth, essentially, which I think there's no question in my mind that the Western nations kind of rule the earth at this time and have for at least a little while. Well, how does that relate to Ephraim and Manasseh? I'm not exactly certain. It's a little puzzling. It's a little weird. Any comments or questions about that? I know that one's you don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole, but
I was just saying, I think that there may be some connections to the Mazarot with these blessings, just like I had mentioned with Benjamin. Because I'm sure you've heard that, the 12 tribes have been assigned to one of these heavenly signs, heavenly bodies, right?
yeah.
And from understanding, Ephraim and Manasseh are assigned Taurus, which is the two horns of the bull.
Right.
So I'm just saying that there may be some lot of times when Yahweh would show something to somebody, he would open the heavens and they would look up and they would, they would read the things that were going on because the heavens declare the glory of God.
Right.
I'm just thinking there might be some clues in there that might give understanding.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think, if you haven't, you should certainly look up, some of the Hebrew Mazarot type of ideas, because it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, the 12 signs of the zodiac are not, as far as my understanding, are not some pagan thing that were invented by, Zoroastrians or something, but was, used by the wise men of Israel long before these pagans adopted it and turned it into some type of astrology thing. It's certainly fascinating. I don't know what to make of it, but the way that the Hebrews look at the Mazarot, the stars of the heavens, is very, very interesting. And it fits with the creation of the world and the redemption of the world of the Messiah Yeshua. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So something to look into. Wayne or Marie, did you want to chat about that?
Yeah, not about what you're talking about, but what Tracy mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
About the Ephraim and Manasseh. If you look at scripture, you can basically interpret, if this translation is correct, you can basically interpret what it's saying here. And it's, okay. It's very deep. It's very deep, but I have looked at it in what scripture tells you about it by just going through words and different phrases. If it's being translated correctly, I do see why you mentioned that the people here is associated with a lot of physical blessings, because these people will be the one, most of them will be the ones going in the natural body into the promised land. That's why it kind of looks this way.
Yeah.
So, that's what I've seen by searching his word and looking to it. And I'm not sure, I'm just saying that if this is translated correctly, and the rest of the translation of the Bible that I've looked at is correct, then that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the only thing, but I'm just saying that those people are the ones that will be going in, most of them will be going in the natural body into the promised land.
Absolutely. I'm totally picking up what you're putting down. Makes a lot of sense to me. Anybody else, comments, questions, or concerns about that? You guys? That's mysterious stuff, and I don't know exactly what you can say about that stuff. It's certainly fascinating to look into. I want to deal with one other thing before we kind of wrap up here, and that is the tribes of Zebulun and Issachar. And Keith had mentioned this a moment ago, and this is in verses 18 and 19. And Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Keith? You want to throw out a couple of things?
Well, no, I was just asking you as far as the idea of the tribes, because we know that when Yeshua picked his disciples, he was probably picking individuals, one from each tribe. At least you would think so. But I didn't know if you'd ever seen anything that actually helped define that.
I haven't, and I heard something about that, just this week, as a matter of fact, that someone said, I don't remember who it was, but there was a lot of speculation that all 11 out of the 12 disciples of Yeshua were supposedly from the tribes of either Issachar or Zebulun. And I thought that is certainly interesting, because we don't have anything clearly written in the Torah, or in the Testaments about that. But it's fascinating because we know that area around the the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, that is traditionally the region where the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali were stationed. And we know that Yeshua was raised in that area, and that almost all of his disciples, as far as we can tell, came from that area of Capernaum and that area up on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee. And so people have speculated that almost all of Yeshua's disciples were actually from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, which is also interesting in relation to that prophecy in Isaiah, I think it's chapter 8 or 9, I don't remember which one, where it's talking about, this great light that has shined in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. So it's a fascinating discussion. It's certainly worth having. I don't know how you could prove it definitively, but it's an interesting thing. Any comments or questions about that one? Well, I'm going to let that one go right there, man. I have kept you long enough. For this being such a hard section to talk about, we sure have done a lot of talking. It's a testament to you guys being engaged in good conversation, and I appreciate that very much.